Hello, my name is Spencer Miller. I am 36 years old. I currently work as a bank employee, a mundane job with long days spent behind the counter, handling transactions and smiling at customers, even though my mind sometimes drifts elsewhere. I live in Floyd County, Kentucky, a quiet place with lush green hills, winding roads blanketed in morning fog, and old wooden houses scattered along the big sandy river. The people here live slowly, friendly, but behind their smiles are stories no one wants to tell. And I too have such a story, one I've tried to bury, but it clings to me, like the long shadow of a fading afternoon. I grew up in Pike County, not far from Floyd County, but it feels like two different worlds. Pike County is where my childhood memories are woven with pain and endurance. My home was at the end of a red dirt road, next to a dense pine forest where the sound of the wind whispering through the trees felt like the murmurs of restless spirits. My father, Donald Miller, was a long-haul truck driver. He was a tall, imposing man with sinewy hands and eyes as sharp as a blade. Every time he returned from his trips, the entire house held its breath, bracing for the storm that was about to hit. My mother, Carolyn, worked at the cafeteria of the local high school, where my younger brother Harris and I studied. She was a petite woman with blonde hair always neatly tied back and eyes that always carried a trace of sadness. She tried to protect us, but my father's ferocity crushed her every effort, leaving scars not just on our bodies but also in our souls. As the eldest, I took it upon myself to be Harris's protector from a young age. My brother, 3 years younger than me, was a sensitive boy who loved to laugh but was easily frightened. I still remember the nights lying in our old bunk bed, hearing my father yelling at my mother in the living room, the sound of shattering dishes and my mother's stifled sobs. Harris would climb up to my bed, pressing himself close to me, whispering, "Spence, are you scared?" I always said no, even though my heart was pounding as if it would burst. I held Harris tightly, trying to shield him, though I was just a child myself, equally terrified, equally in pain. My father's fists spared no one. Once I was hit for spilling coffee on his shirt. The punch was so hard that I fell to the floor, my ears ringing and blood trickling from my lip to my chin. But what hurt more than anything was seeing Harris cowering in the corner, eyes wide, too scared to make a sound. The wounds on our bodies eventually healed, but the scars in our hearts never did. I grew up with a sense of helplessness, suppressed anger and shame for not being able to protect my mother, protect Harris, and sometimes protect myself. I promised myself that when I grew up, I would leave this place, build a different life, a family without shouting, without nights spent awake in fear. And I succeeded, at least in part. I got married. My wife, Elena, 33 years old, is a strong woman with a radiant smile and a warm heart. We first met when she came to the bank where I work, and I helped her open an account. From that moment, I realized I couldn't live without her. Elena is the light in my darkest days. We got married and have an 8-year-old son named Liam. I strive to be a good father, patient, attentive, always there when Liam needs me. But sometimes when I look into his innocent eyes, I see myself, a boy who once longed for love without having to pay for it with beatings. Harris grew up too, left Pike County and became a successful man. He works for a big company and has a 13-year-old daughter named Sophie, a smart girl with quiet eyes as if she's hiding some secret. Harris had a marriage that ended in divorce 6 years ago. I don't know the exact reasons, only hearing vaguely that his ex-wife couldn't handle his temper. Every time I meet Harris, I feel an inexplicable unease. His eyes, though still those of the boy who once clung to me during those terrifying nights, now have something cold and distant about them. I tell myself it's just my imagination, that Harris is just another victim of our childhood, that he couldn't possibly become like our father. But Elena, with her sharp intuition, doesn't think so. She once told me after an evening when Harris came over, "Spence, I don't like the way Harris looks at Liam. Something's not right." I brushed it off, laughing. "He's my brother, Elena. He's just a bit hot-tempered, that's all." But deep down, I knew I was avoiding something. Avoiding the truth, avoiding the memories and avoiding the fear that the shadow of our past still hasn't let go of my family. My family has a habit I hate, keeping up appearances. Every scandal, every stain is swept under the rug. My parents, now old, still live in the old house in Pike County, maintaining the facade of a normal family. My father still occasionally recounts stories of his trucking days as if he never made our home tremble with fear. My mother still cooks big meals, smiles at the neighbors, as if she never cried in the corner of the kitchen. And I, though I've left that place, am still pulled back by invisible threads. Threads of blood, of memories, and of the silence I was trained to keep from a young age. Every year at Christmas, the whole family gathers at my parents' house. It's a tradition, a way to maintain the happy family facade my parents have always worked to uphold. Elena and I drive from Floyd County to Pike County, bringing Liam carefully wrapped gifts and a heavy feeling in our hearts. I always tell myself that this year will be different, that I won't let old memories overshadow Liam's joy. But every time I step into that house, the smell of old wood, the crackling of the fireplace, and my father's gaze pull me back to those horrific days. I look at Liam, innocently playing with Sophie, and I pray he'll never have to know the pain Harris and I endured. But deep down, I know the past doesn't let go easily. It's like a monster lurking in the shadows, waiting for a moment to rise. And that moment unexpectedly came on a cold Christmas night, when the twinkling lights and the sound of carols were nothing but a fragile veneer over a storm about to break. I sat in the living room listening to Liam and Sophie's laughter from the kitchen, where my mother was baking cookies. Elena sat beside me, her hand intertwined with mine, but I could sense her tension. Harris sat across from me, holding a glass of whiskey, his gaze drifting out the window. My father, as usual, was recounting a story about his trucking days, his voice booming with pride. But I couldn't focus. There was something in the air, an unease I couldn't name. I looked at Harris, searching for the boy who once clung to me, but all I saw was a man with cold eyes, as if holding back a rage ready to explode. The Christmas dinner at my parents' house in Pike County was an unbreakable tradition, though sometimes I just wanted to turn the car around and head back to Floyd County, leaving this place behind. The old wooden house, with its lingering smell of rotting wood and faint cigarette smoke, remained unchanged, as if time had never touched it. My mother was busy in the kitchen, preparing roasted turkey and gingerbread cookies which Liam and Sophie adored. The children's laughter echoed from the corner of the house, where they played with cheap toys my mother had pulled from the basement. I tried to smile, tried to blend into the festive atmosphere, but every time I saw my father, every time I heard his voice, I felt myself shrinking back into the terrified boy I once was, bracing for an unexpected outburst. "Spencer, you listening to me?" My father's voice cut through my thoughts. He sat at the head of the table, the old armchair creaking under his weight. His eyes, though dimmed by age, were still sharp as a blade. "Yes, sir," I replied, my voice dry. I didn't want to anger him, not today, not in front of Liam and Sophie, but he only gave a faint smirk, took a sip of his whiskey, and continued his story about a snowy night on the highway, when he nearly died after his truck skidded. Elena squeezed my hand tighter, as if trying to pull me out of the memories surging back. She whispered, "Are you okay?" I nodded, but we both knew it was a lie. I wasn't okay. I've never truly been okay returning to this house. Dinner began, and everything seemed calm. My mother brought out the turkey, its rich aroma filling the room. Liam and Sophie, seated at the small table nearby, giggled as they compared who could stack more cookies. I looked at my son with his messy brown hair and bright eyes and told myself I'd done the right thing by leaving Pike County, by giving Liam a different life, a life without fear. But then everything shattered, faster than a blink. Liam, running through the living room to get more water, tripped over the old rug. He stumbled, and the glass of water in his hand spilled, splashing onto Harris's shirt. It was just a small stain, a few harmless drops. But I saw Harris's eyes change instantly. Those eyes, I recognized them immediately. They were my father's eyes, the eyes from the terrifying nights of my childhood. My heart sank, but before I could react, before I could call Liam back, Harris shot to his feet. "What the hell are you doing, Liam?" Harris's voice roared, echoing through the now silent room. Everyone froze. My mother stopped carving the turkey, my father stopped chewing, Elena gripped the edge of the table. Liam stood petrified, the glass slipping from his hand and shattering on the floor. He stammered, I'm sorry, Uncle Harris, I didn't mean to." But Harris wasn't listening. He stepped forward, swift as a predator. I saw his hand rise, and before I could leap from my chair, before I could shout, Harris's fist slammed into Liam's face. A sickening sound rang out, the crack of bone, Liam's scream, and the drip of blood hitting the wooden floor. Liam crumpled, clutching his face, blood streaming through his fingers, his eyes wide with pain and panic. "No!" Elena's voice broke as she rushed to Liam. She knelt beside him, cradling our son, her hands trembling as she tried to wipe the blood from his face. "Liam, baby, look at me. Oh God, Spencer, call a doctor." I stood there, frozen, my mind blank. Everything happened so fast, so unexpectedly, like a nightmare I couldn't wake from. Harris stood there, panting, his fists still clenched, as if his anger wasn't yet sated. Sophie at the small table curled up in fear, her eyes wide as she stared at her father, silent. My mother, still holding the carving knife, muttered, "He probably just slipped." "It's fine, don't make a fuss." Her voice trembled, but I heard the desperation in it, the desperation of someone accustomed to covering things up. My father stood slowly, as if nothing serious had happened. "Come on, Elena, don't overreact. The kid spilled water. Harris just lost his temper a bit, no big deal." He looked at me, his eyes commanding. "Spencer, tell your wife to calm down." I wanted to scream, to lunge at Harris, to punch him the way he'd just hit my son. But I couldn't move. My feet felt nailed to the floor, my mouth dry. Old memories flooded back. The times my father hit me. The times I watched my mother cry. The times I told myself to stay silent, to keep the peace. I looked at Liam, still clutching his face, sobbing in Elena's arms. Blood stained his shirt, and each of his cries stabbed my heart like a knife. "Spencer!" Elena's voice cracked with anger and pain. "What are you doing just standing there? Your son is bleeding." Her words slapped me awake, pulling me out of my paralysis. I rushed to Liam, kneeling beside him, my hands shaking as I touched his shoulder. "Liam, are you okay? It's Dad, look at me." But Liam just cried, his eyes filled with fear as he looked at me, as if I were a part of this nightmare too. I turned to Harris, my voice trembling with rage. "What the hell did you just do, Harris? You hit my son." But Harris only stared back, his eyes cold, without a trace of remorse. "He needs to learn to be more careful," he said, his voice flat, as if breaking an 8-year-old's nose was normal. My mother stepped forward, placing a hand on Harris's shoulder as if protecting him. "Come on, Spencer, calm down. Don't make a big deal out of this. Harris didn't mean it. Liam will be fine." She looked at me, her eyes pleading. "Don't make a scene. It's Christmas." "Mom, Harris just broke your 8-year-old grandson's nose. How can I stay calm? Why do you keep covering for him like this? I can't forgive him for this," I said, my voice a mix of anger and despair. My father cut in, his voice low but sharp as a knife. "Harris is about to be nominated to the company's board of directors. You want to ruin his future over something this small?" He stepped toward me, towering and intimidating as he did when I was a child. "You got hit plenty of times and didn't die. Men need to toughen up." His words were another blow, not to my face, but to my heart. I looked at my father, my mother, Harris, and then at Liam, still crying in Elena's arms. I saw myself in my son, a boy who endured, who stayed silent, who hoped things would pass. But I didn't want Liam to live like I did. I didn't want my son to grow up with fear and silence. "We need to take Liam to the hospital," I said, my voice firmer than I thought possible. I helped Liam stand, ignoring my father's glare and my mother's whispers. Elena held Liam close, her eyes burning with fury as she looked at Harris. "Don't ever come near my son again," she said, her voice low but icy. Harris shrugged as if he didn't care. "Suit yourself," he said, turning away and taking a sip of his whiskey, as if everything was over. But for me, it was only the beginning. As I guided Liam to the car with Elena by my side, I knew the happy family facade my parents had clung to was shattered. I looked at Harris, the brother I once protected, and realized he was no longer the boy from our past. He had become something else, a version I feared I couldn't save. As the car rolled down the foggy road toward the hospital, I held Liam tightly, trying to hold back the tears threatening to spill. Elena sat in the front seat, silent, but I knew she was angry. Angry at Harris, at my parents, and maybe even at me for not stopping this from happening. I wanted to tell her I'd make it right, that I'd protect Liam, that I wouldn't let the past repeat itself. But for now, I could only drive through the suppressed rage, listening to my son's sobs blend with the cold Christmas night's wind. The Pike County Hospital loomed in the darkness, its flickering neon sign casting a feeble glow. I parked the car and hurriedly carried Liam out of the back seat, his small, trembling body in my arms making me want to scream. Elena strode ahead, pushing open the hospital doors, her voice sharp as she called for a nurse. "My son is hurt. We need a doctor now." The emergency room was crowded, filled with the smell of antiseptic and the steady hum of machines. A nurse led us to a small room where Liam was placed on a bed, his face pale under the fluorescent lights. I stood there, helpless, watching as the nurse wiped blood from my son's face, each crimson drop making me want to look away. A doctor, a middle-aged man with salt and pepper hair and a calm voice, entered. He examined Liam, gently lifting his chin, and asked, "What happened to you, buddy? Who did this?" Liam looked at me, his eyes filled with fear, as if begging me to answer for him. I opened my mouth, but my throat tightened. The image of Harris, his fist crashing into Liam's face, played vividly in my mind. I wanted to shout the truth, to say that my brother, the one I once protected, had done this. But then my father's voice echoed in my head. "Harris is about to be nominated to the board of directors. Don't ruin his future." And my mother's trembling voice, "He probably just slipped. Don't make a fuss." I felt myself shrinking, becoming the boy Spencer once was, standing before my father, too afraid to argue, too afraid to speak. "Liam got hit by a friend," I said, my voice hoarse, barely recognizing myself. "He was playing with a friend and something happened." Elena whipped around, her eyes blazing with fury. "Spencer!" she hissed, her voice cutting like a knife. "What are you saying?" I avoided her gaze, pretending to focus on Liam, but I felt her disappointment like a frigid gust of wind. The doctor glanced at me, his eyes skeptical, but he didn't press further. He turned to Liam, speaking gently. "Your nose is broken, but we'll fix it. You'll be okay, all right?" Liam nodded weakly, but his eyes stayed fixed on me as if asking, "Dad, why did you lie?" I wanted to kneel down, hold him, tell him I was sorry, that I was just trying to keep everything from falling apart. But I couldn't. I just stood there, hands in my pockets, trying to suppress the emotions threatening to spill over. After the doctor bandaged Liam and prescribed painkillers, we were told to wait for the X-ray results. Elena sat beside Liam, holding his hand, softly singing a lullaby she used to sing when he was little. I stood in the corner, feeling like an outsider in my own family. When the doctor returned, he said Liam's nose would heal with time, but fortunately there were no other serious injuries. I let out a sigh of relief, but it lasted only a moment. Elena stood up, looking at me, her eyes no longer filled with anger but with a deep disappointment, as if she no longer recognized me. "I'm taking Liam to my parents' house," she said, her voice flat but cold. "You stay here, do whatever you want." "Elena, wait!" I stepped forward, trying to grab her hand, but she pulled away. "I don't want to hear it, Spencer. You chose to stand with them, with Harris, with that sick family of yours. You lied to protect him. Your son is lying here, his nose broken, bleeding, and you still choose to stay silent." Her voice broke, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I thought you were different from them, Spencer. I was wrong." Her words hit harder than any punch I'd ever taken from my father. I wanted to explain, to say I was just trying to keep everything from crumbling. that I was afraid if I spoke up, the whole family would collapse. But deep down, I knew Elena was right. I had been weak, just as I'd been weak before my father, silent when my mother cried, bowing my head when Harris was beaten. I had let the past control me, and now I was letting it hurt Liam. Elena carried Liam out. I stood frozen, watching their silhouettes disappear into the distance, feeling like the world was collapsing beneath my feet. "Elena, I'm sorry," I called after her, but she didn't turn back. The hospital door closed, leaving me with a heavy silence and a chaotic mind. I slumped into a waiting room chair, hands clutching my head, trying to piece together the fragments of my thoughts. But all I could see was Liam's bloodied, terrified face and Elena's disappointed eyes. I wondered who I had become. I had left Pike County, built a family, sworn not to let my son live in the fear I once did. But now, what was I doing? I was lying to protect Harris, to preserve the family facade my parents had always clung to. I felt like I was falling into a deep pit. And then a memory from when I was 12 came rushing back, vivid and sharp as a blade. That evening I had broken a plate in the kitchen, a cheap one my mother cherished because it was a gift from her grandmother. My father was in the living room watching football. When he heard the crash, he shot up, storming into the kitchen like a hurricane. "What the hell did you do, Spencer?" he roared, then hurled the beer bottle in his hand at me. It struck my forehead and shattered on the floor. Blood began to drip down my face, my head throbbing with pain. My mother stood in the corner crying, but she didn't dare intervene. Harris, only 9 at the time, hid behind the door, his eyes wide, too scared to speak. Later, my father made me kneel on the floor, facing the broken pieces, and said, "You need to learn to be careful, or the consequences will be worse." I knelt there for hours, my knees aching, my heart filled with fear and humiliation. That memory made me shudder, as if I were still that 12-year-old boy, helpless and afraid. I looked down at my trembling hands and asked myself, was I letting Liam become a 12-year-old version of me? The thought was like a fire, burning away every excuse I'd used to justify my silence. I had lied in the hospital, chosen to protect Harris over my own son. I had let the fear from my past control me, and now I was losing Elena, losing Liam, and perhaps losing myself. I stood up and walked out of the hospital. The icy wind blew through, carrying the scent of pine from the nearby forest. I looked up at the sky where stars twinkled faintly through the fog. I knew I had to do something to make things right, but I didn't know where to start. I was afraid that confronting Harris, shattering the family's facade, would cost me everything. My parents, my brother, and the memories of the days when I believed our family could be happy. But then I thought of Liam, of his pain-filled eyes, and I knew I couldn't keep silent any longer. I drove back to Floyd County, the familiar winding road now feeling endlessly long. Darkness enveloped everything, with only the weak beams of my headlights cutting through the thick fog. I didn't turn on the radio, not wanting any sound to disrupt the silence in my mind. I needed to think, to find a way to confront everything. Harris, my parents, Elena, and most importantly, myself. But every time I closed my eyes, I saw Liam's face, blood streaming from his nose. His eyes filled with fear as he looked at me. I gripped the steering wheel tightly, trying to suppress the anger rising in my chest. As I turned onto the road leading to our house, my heart tightened. Our small home, once filled with Liam's laughter and Elena's warm voice, was now pitch black, with only the porch light flickering faintly. I stepped inside and flipped the light switch, but the dim yellow glow only highlighted the emptiness. Elena and Liam were gone, taking what they needed. Elena's closet was empty, save for a few of my shirts hanging forlornly. Liam's bed, usually cluttered with toys, was bare. I stood in the living room listening to the steady ticking of the clock, feeling like the world had abandoned me. I collapsed onto the sofa, hands clutching my head, trying to hold back the tears threatening to spill. This house, where I once thought we'd build a loving home, was now just an empty shell, much like the family I'd tried to hold together in Pike County. I thought of Elena, of the disappointment in her eyes when I lied at the hospital. I thought of Liam, the way he clung to his mother as if he no longer trusted me. And I thought of Harris, the brother I once protected, who I'd hoped would escape the shadow of our past, but who had now become a version of our father. The days that followed passed like a foggy nightmare. I went to work, sat behind the bank counter, smiled at customers, but my mind was detached, like a ghost. Colleagues asked if I was okay, and I nodded, muttering a few words to brush them off. But every time I returned home, the silence choked me. I called Elena, but she didn't answer. I texted, apologizing, begging for a chance to explain, but received only silence in return. I started losing sleep. Each night I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to the wind whistling through the windows. Old memories flooded back, relentless. I remembered the times my father hit me, the times my mother cried in the kitchen corner, the times Harris clung to me begging for protection. I wondered if I could have done things differently, if I could have stood up to my father, to Harris, to the world, to protect those I loved. But I hadn't. I'd stayed silent, a coward, and now I was paying the price. One evening, after a long day at the bank, I returned home, exhausted and empty. I tossed my keys onto the table, opened the fridge, but found nothing except a few cans of beer and an expired carton of milk. I was about to sink into the sofa, bracing for another night of tormenting thoughts, when I noticed an envelope on the floor near the front door. A plain white envelope with no sender's name, only the scrawled words, "To Uncle Spencer." My heart quickened. I recognized the handwriting. It was Sophie's, my niece. I opened the envelope, my hands trembling slightly. Inside were 3 carefully folded pages filled with handwritten lines. I sat down, took a deep breath, and began to read. From the first line, I felt as if someone was squeezing my heart. "I know you'll believe me. Please help me." Sophie wrote that Harris had been beating her regularly, not just once, but for years. Whenever her grades weren't good, whenever she disobeyed, Harris would take out his anger on her. She described being hit with a belt, slapped across the face, locked in a dark room. She wrote about nights spent curled up in bed, listening to her father's shouting from the living room, praying he wouldn't come into her room. She wrote, "I'm so scared, Uncle Spencer. I don't know what to do. My mom left and I have no one to talk to, but I know you'll understand how I feel." Reading her words, I felt my blood boiling. Each sentence, each word was like a knife twisting in my chest. I saw Sophie, the quiet 13-year-old with those silent eyes, the girl who had sat curled up watching her father hit Liam without daring to speak. I saw myself in her, a helpless child living in fear with no one to turn to. But what hurt most was the final line of her letter. "I saw you stay silent when Harris hit Liam. I'm scared you'll stay silent about me too. But I still want to try, because I have no one else." I folded the letter, my hands shaking so much that it slipped to the floor. Rage surged within me, uncontrollable, like a fire burning everything in its path. I wanted to scream, to race to Harris's house, to punch him the way he'd hit Liam, hit Sophie. I wanted to ask him why he'd become like our father, why he'd let the shadow of our past consume him. But above all, I was angry at myself, angry for staying silent, for lying, for letting Sophie think I'd abandoned her the way I'd abandoned myself. I stood up, pacing the living room, trying to suppress the fury that made me want to smash everything. I thought of Harris, the brother I'd once shielded, held tightly during those terrifying nights. I'd thought he was a victim like me, that he bore the same scars. But now I realized Harris wasn't just a victim. He'd chosen to become the one who inflicts pain, just like our father. I picked up the letter, reading it again, each word a reminder that I could no longer hide. Sophie was begging for my help, and this time I wouldn't stay silent. I thought of Liam, of his hurt-filled eyes, and I knew I had to act, not just for Sophie, but for my son, for Elena, and for myself. I had to break this cycle of pain, no matter the cost. I grabbed my phone and called Elena again. Still no answer, but I left a voicemail, my voice trembling. "Elena, I'm sorry. I was wrong. But I'll make it right. I'll protect Liam, protect you, and I won't let this go on. Please believe in me one more time. I didn't know if she'd listen, if she'd forgive me, but I knew I couldn't stop. I looked at Sophie's letter, its scrawled words like a cry for help from hell. And I told myself this time, I wouldn't let her or my son suffer any longer. I wouldn't let the past win. I would fight, whether it meant facing Harris, my parents, or the demons within myself. I made up my mind to act. I couldn't let this cycle of suffering continue any longer. I grabbed my car keys and rushed out, not bothering to put on a coat despite the biting night wind. I drove to my in-laws' house in Johnson County, my heart pounding, my mind reeling with the words I wanted to say. When I knocked on the door, Elena's father, George, appeared, his expression stern but not as cold as it had been before. "What are you doing here?" he said, his voice low. "My daughter doesn't want to see a spineless husband like you." "I know," I replied, my voice hoarse, "but I need to talk to her. I need to apologize, and I need her to know I won't stay silent anymore." George studied me as if weighing my words, then nodded and opened the door to let me in. Elena was in the living room, sitting beside Liam. He was asleep on the sofa, his nose still wrapped in bandages. When Elena looked up and saw me, her eyes were still filled with hurt, but this time, I didn't look away. I knelt in front of her, clutching Sophie's letter tightly. "Elena," I began, my voice trembling. "I'm sorry. I was wrong to lie at the hospital, to let Harris get away with it, to let you and Liam suffer. I was scared of breaking the family, scared of facing the past. But I don't want to live like that anymore. I want to protect Liam, protect Sophie, and I need you by my side." Elena looked at me, her eyes glistening with tears, but she didn't speak. I handed her Sophie's letter, my voice catching. "Sophie wrote this. She's being beaten by Harris, Elena. She's begging for my help. And I won't let this go on. I'm going to fight for justice, for Liam, for Sophie, for all of us." Elena took the letter, scanning it, and I saw her hands tremble. When she reached the part where Sophie described the beatings, tears spilled down her cheeks. "Oh my God, Spencer," she whispered. "How did we not see this? How did you let things get this far?" Her voice broke, but this time it wasn't out of anger, it was out of pain. "I don't know," I admitted, tears rolling down my own face. "But I'm going to make it right. I won't let Liam or Sophie live the way I did. I need you, Elena. I need us to do this together." She looked at me long and hard, as if searching for the man she once loved. Then she nodded slowly and took my hand. "All right, Spencer," she said. "But this time, no more lies, no more silence. We're going to protect the kids no matter what happens." I nodded, feeling as if a weight had been lifted from my shoulders. For the first time in days, I could breathe. We sat there hand in hand, watching Liam sleep, and I knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but at least I wasn't alone anymore. The next day, I secretly visited Sophie at her school. During lunch break, I took her to the cafeteria, buying her a hot cocoa and a warm meal. She looked smaller than usual, as if trying to make herself invisible. And when I looked closely, I noticed bruises on her neck. I sat across from her, forcing a smile to make her feel safe. "Are you okay, Sophie?" I asked gently. She nodded but didn't meet my eyes. "I'm sorry for sending the letter," she said, her voice barely audible. "I didn't know what else to do." "No, Sophie," I said, placing my hand on hers. "You don't need to apologize. You were so brave. I'm the one who should be sorry for not seeing what you've been going through. But I'm here now, and I'm going to help you." Sophie looked up, her eyes red. "But Dad, he'll be so mad. He always says no one can know, that it's family business." I felt anger rising again, but I suppressed it, not wanting to scare her. "Sophie, what your dad is doing is wrong. No one is allowed to hit you, not your dad, not anyone. I'm going to help you, but I need evidence. If he does anything to you again, try to record it, take pictures, or keep any proof. Can you do that?" Sophie hesitated, but then nodded. "I'll try," she said, her voice trembling. I gave her my phone number, telling her to text me whenever she needed. As I left, I hugged her, feeling like I was hugging the boy I once was, Spencer, who had longed for someone to protect him. Next, I contacted a lawyer in Floyd County, Margaret Cole, who specialized in child abuse cases. When I arrived at her office, a small room filled with books and papers, I told her everything. About Liam, Sophie, Harris, and my own childhood. I showed her Sophie's letter, photos of Liam's injuries, and shared memories I'd never told anyone but Elena. Ms. Cole listened, taking careful notes, her eyes sharp but non-judgmental. "You did the right thing coming here, Spencer," she said. "What you're describing is serious child abuse. We'll need more evidence, but Sophie's letter and Liam's medical records are a good start. Are you prepared to see this through? It won't be easy, especially since it involves your family." "I'm ready," I replied, my voice steadier than ever. "I don't want my son or my niece to live in fear anymore." Ms. Cole nodded and guided me on gathering more documentation, medical reports, photos, witness statements. I went home and began organizing everything from Liam's hospital records to the texts I exchanged with Sophie. I knew I was stepping onto a dangerous path, but every time I thought of Liam's hurt-filled eyes or Sophie's trembling handwriting, I found the strength to keep going. I quietly filed a report with Kentucky's Department of Children and Youth Services, attaching Sophie's letter and Liam's medical records. I did this without telling my parents or Harris, knowing they'd try to stop me. A few days later, I got a call from an investigator, Linda Harris, a coincidental name that sent a shiver down my spine. Ms. Linda said they'd received my report and would summon Harris for questioning. "We'll need statements from you, your son, and Sophie," she said. "Are you sure you want to proceed? Once the investigation starts, there's no turning back." "I'm sure," I replied, though my heart pounded. I knew this decision would change everything, tearing apart the facade my family had upheld for years, but I couldn't stop. Not now. With my and Elena's help, Sophie provided more evidence. She sent me a recording of Harris shouting, interspersed with her cries. She also took photos of bruises on her arms and back, marks no child could inflict on themselves. When I sent this evidence to Ms. Linda, she said the investigation was now officially expanded. "We're taking this to court," she said, "and we'll ensure Sophie is protected under the law. Your family will be her legal guardians." About a week later, I was granted temporary custody of Sophie, removing her from the abusive environment and ensuring her physical and emotional safety. Meanwhile, Harris was summoned. I wasn't present at the questioning, but Ms. Linda kept me updated. She said Harris denied everything, blaming Sophie, calling her rebellious and making it up. He claimed her injuries were self-inflicted, that she was just seeking attention after her mother left. Hearing those words felt like a punch to the gut. I knew Harris was lying, just as our father had lied to cover up his actions. But I also knew the truth wouldn't be buried this time. The news spread, reaching my parents faster than I expected. They immediately summoned me to their house in Pike County. Stepping inside felt like returning to my childhood, each step into that house a step into fear. My father sat in his armchair, my mother standing beside him, her hands clasped tightly. "What the hell are you doing, Spencer?" my father roared, his voice like thunder. "You dare accuse your own brother? You dare disgrace this family?" "You're a traitor to your own blood," my mother said, her voice trembling. "Harris is your brother. He just lost control a little, like your father did. You want to destroy our family over a few small things?" I looked at them, the people who had once been my entire world, and felt a distance I'd never felt before. "Small things?" I asked, my voice cold. "Harris broke Liam's nose. He's been beating Sophie, Mom. Your granddaughter, the one you say you love, has been abused for years. And you still want me to stay silent?" My father shot to his feet, pointing at my face. "You got hit plenty of times and you're still alive, aren't you? Don't make a big deal out of this, Spencer. Harris has a bright future ahead. You want to ruin it?" I looked straight into his eyes for the first time in my life without flinching. If Harris's future is built on Liam and Sophie's pain, then I'd rather destroy it. And if you keep defending him, I'll cut ties with you both. I don't need a family built on lies and violence. My mother burst into tears, but my father just stared at me, his eyes filled with anger and disappointment. I turned and walked out of that house, knowing it might be the last time I ever set foot there. But this time, I didn't feel fear. I felt free. For the first time in my life, I stood tall before my father, my mother, and the shadow of the past that had haunted me for years. I walked out of the Pike County house, the cold wind blowing through, but I didn't shudder. I knew I was doing the right thing, even if it meant an irreparable rift with my blood family. The weeks that followed were a blur of long, tense days. Harris was charged with serious child abuse, an accusation that Ms. Linda from the Department of Children and Youth Services said was backed by enough evidence to go to trial. Sophie's letter, the recording of Harris's raging voice, the photos of bruises on her body, and Liam's medical records all painted a clear picture of a man consumed by the darkness of his past. I knew Harris wouldn't admit guilt easily. He called me, not to apologize, but to threaten. "What do you think you're doing, Spencer?" His voice came through the phone, cold but trembling, as if struggling to contain his anger. "You trying to destroy me? You want the whole world to know our family's a bunch of failures?" I didn't respond right away. I gripped the phone tightly, took a deep breath, and said, "No, Harris. I'm just trying to protect Liam and Sophie. If you think that's destroying you, maybe you need to take a hard look at yourself." I hung up before he could say more, my heart pounding, but not out of fear. I was tired of dodging, tired of preserving the false facade my family had built. This time I was going all the way. The hearing was scheduled at the Pike County Courthouse, an old building with yellowing white walls and creaking wooden benches. I walked into the courtroom, hands clasped tightly, feeling the weight of the world on my shoulders. Elena sat beside me, her hand holding mine, saying nothing. But her presence was enough to make me feel I wasn't alone. Liam stayed at Elena's parents' house, as we didn't want him to witness what was about to unfold. Sophie, however, was there, seated in the front row with a social worker. She wore a pale green sweater, her hair neatly tied back, but her quiet eyes seemed to hide a storm. I looked at Sophie and I saw myself, a child who once longed for protection, hoping someone would speak up for them. Harris sat at the defendant's table, dressed in a gray suit, his hair neatly combed, looking less like an accused abuser and more like a businessman preparing for a board meeting. He didn't look at me, didn't look at Sophie, just kept his head down, eyes fixed on the table. His lawyer, a middle-aged man with a smooth voice, argued that it was all a misunderstanding, that Sophie was a rebellious child and her injuries were self-inflicted. I listened, feeling the blood rush to my head. How could he stand there, lying so brazenly, when the bruises on Sophie's body, her cries in the recording, and her trembling letter were undeniable evidence? When it was my turn to testify, I stepped up to the stand, my legs feeling heavy. The judge, a woman with silver hair and sharp eyes, looked at me and nodded as if to say, "Tell the truth." I took a deep breath, trying to organize the chaos in my mind. I looked out at the courtroom, saw Elena's encouraging smile, saw Sophie with her head bowed, and saw my mother seated in the back row, her hands clasped tightly. My father was there too, but his eyes were cold, as if I were a stranger. "I'm Spencer Miller," I began, my voice trembling slightly. "I'm the brother of the defendant, Harris Miller, and the father of Liam Miller, one of the victims." I paused, taking another breath, feeling as if each word was tearing a piece of me apart. I was also a victim, not of Harris, but of our father, Donald Miller. The courtroom fell silent, the only sounds the faint rustle of breathing and the scratching of the court clerk's pen. I recounted my childhood for the first time in public, letting the painful memories spill out into words. I spoke of the nights when my father returned from his trucking trips, drunk and violent, of the punches that sent me crashing to the floor, of my mother crying in the kitchen corner, and of how I tried to shield Harris, even though I was just a child myself. I told them about the time I knelt on the floor for breaking a plate, about the scars on my body and soul that I've carried my whole life. And then I spoke of Harris, how he, Once a victim like me had become an abuser, beating my son, beating his daughter. I stayed silent for too long, I said, my voice choking. I lied at the hospital, saying Liam was hit by a friend because I was afraid of breaking the family. But I was wrong. I can't let my son Liam or my niece Sophie grow up in the fear I lived in. I can't let my brother keep hurting the people I love. I looked at Sophie as I said my final words, and I saw her lift her head, her red-rimmed eyes gleaming with a spark of hope. I looked at Elena, and she nodded, tears streaming down her face. But when I looked at my mother, I saw her break down, her hands covering her face, her shoulders shaking. My father, seated beside her, stood abruptly, his eyes burning with rage and disappointment. Without a word, he turned and stormed out of the courtroom, the door slamming shut behind him. The sound echoed like a declaration that I had lost him, the father I had spent years trying to please. The hearing stretched on, but my testimony, combined with Sophie's evidence and Liam's medical records, was enough to convince the judge that the case warranted a full trial. Harris was remanded in custody, his eyes still cold, showing no remorse as he was led away. I didn't know if he would ever realize what he'd done or if he would remain forever trapped in a cycle of anger and pain. After the hearing, the Department of Children and Youth Services upheld their decision to let Sophie live temporarily with my family. Elena and I brought her to our home in Floyd County, where Liam had returned, though he was still hesitant to talk about Uncle Harris. Sophie stepped into the house, clutching her backpack tightly, her eyes avoiding ours as if afraid she wasn't welcome. I knelt in front of her, placing my hands on her shoulders. "Sophie," I said, "you're safe here. Your Aunt Elena and I will take care of you. You don't have to be afraid anymore." She looked at me, then suddenly threw her arms around me, sobbing. "Thank you, Uncle," she whispered, her voice choked. Elena stood beside us, tears streaming down her face, but she smiled and pulled Sophie into a hug. Liam ran over from the corner of the room, wrapping his arms around Sophie, and in that moment I felt that our family, though wounded, could begin to heal. In the days that followed, we started rebuilding. Elena and I took Sophie to see a therapist who helped her confront the trauma she'd endured. Liam began opening up more, talking about his fears, and I listened, striving to be the father I never had. But every night when the house was quiet, I still heard echoes of the hearing. My mother's sobs, the slam of my father's exit, and my own voice, daring to speak the truth for the first time. I knew this journey wasn't over. Harris would face a trial, and I would have to face the consequences of breaking my silence. But when I watched Sophie and Liam playing in the yard, when I saw Elena smile at me across the dinner table, I knew I had done the right thing. I had chosen to protect the people I loved, even at the cost of losing my birth family. And for the first time in my life, I felt like a real man. Not a scared boy, but a father, a husband, a man ready to stand up for justice. As I walked out of the courthouse that day with Elena by my side and Sophie trailing behind, I knew I had changed. Not just because I had confronted Harris, my parents, or my past, but because I had chosen to protect the people I loved, even at the cost of irreparable cracks in my birth family. The full trial took place a few months after the hearing. Harris, backed by an expensive legal team, tried to downplay his crimes, but the evidence was overwhelming. Sophie's letter, the recording of his raging voice, the photos of her bruises, and the testimonies from me and Liam. The judge, with a stern but fair gaze, declared Harris guilty of serious child abuse. He was sentenced to 3 years of probation with mandatory psychological treatment and strict supervision. As the verdict was read, Harris bowed his head, silent, but I saw no trace of remorse in his eyes. I wondered if therapy could ever change him, or if the shadow of our father had rooted itself too deeply in his soul to be undone. I didn't see Harris after the trial. I didn't want to. He had become a stranger, no longer the boy who once clung to me during those terrifying nights. I had tried to save him, to shield him, but I couldn't save someone who didn't want to be saved. I only hoped that one day he would look in the mirror and see what he had done, not just to Sophie and Liam, but to himself. My father never forgave me. After the hearing, he cut off all contact, ignoring my calls and messages. Once I drove to Pike County and stood outside the old house, but he didn't open the door. Through the window, I saw him sitting in his armchair, eyes fixed on the TV as if I didn't exist. I turned away, not knocking again. Something in me broke as I realized I had lost my father, but at the same time I felt relief. I no longer needed his approval, no longer needed to live to please a man who had left so many scars on me. My mother was different. She called me a few weeks after the trial, her voice trembling over the phone. "Spencer, I'm sorry," she said, and I heard her stifled sobs. I didn't know things had gone this far. I just wanted to keep the family together. I wanted to be angry, to ask why she stayed silent when my father hit me when Harris hurt Sophie, but I couldn't. I only said, "Mom, I don't want to lose you, but I can't keep living in lies anymore. If you want to see Liam, see Sophie, you have to accept that I'll never forgive Harris." She agreed, though I knew it broke her heart. We kept in touch, but it was limited. Short calls, rare visits where she hugged Liam and Sophie but never mentioned Harris or my father. Meanwhile, Elena and I poured our hearts into caring for Sophie. She officially moved in with us in Floyd County, into a small room Elena decorated with blue curtains and a little desk for Sophie to draw on. Though still reserved, Sophie slowly opened up. We took her to see a therapist, Ms. Anna, a gentle but firm woman who specialized in helping children overcome trauma. The sessions weren't easy. Some days Sophie came back with red eyes, silent, but other days she smiled, talking about a drawing she'd made or a story she'd read. Elena and I were patient, helping her rebuild the sense of safety she had lost long ago. Liam needed time to heal, too. He still flinched at loud noises, and some nights I found him curled up in bed clutching his pillow. I sat with him, told stories, sang the silly songs Elena used to sing, and slowly Liam began to laugh again. One day he asked me, "Dad, Uncle Harris won't come back, right?" I hugged him tightly, promising I wouldn't let anyone hurt him again. And this time, I kept my word. Christmas came that year, but it was unlike any Christmas before. We didn't return to Pike County, didn't sit around the table with my parents, didn't try to maintain the happy family facade. Instead, Elena, Liam, Sophie, and I stayed in Floyd County, in our little house where there were no shouts, no fear. We set up a small Christmas tree, hung twinkling lights, and spread colored paper across the dining table. Liam and Sophie sat together, coloring Christmas pictures, a lopsided Santa, a red-nosed reindeer, and a snow-covered house. Elena sat beside me, her hand in mine, and we watched the kids, our hearts filled with a peace I had never known. That evening, when I went into the bedroom, I found an envelope on the nightstand. Sophie's scrawled handwriting made my heart skip a beat. I called Elena, and we sat on the bed, opening the letter together. Sophie's words were simple but carried a world of emotion. "Uncle Spencer and Aunt Elena, I don't know how to thank you enough. I thought I'd always live in fear the way Dad made me feel. But you've given me a home, a family, and a place where I don't have to hide. I know Liam was scared too, but I see him smiling more, and so am I. I love you both, and I'll never forget what you've done." Elena broke down, tears streaming down her cheeks. I couldn't hold back either, pulling her into a tight embrace, feeling as if all the pain and guilt of the past months melted away in that moment. Sophie's letter wasn't just a thank you, it was proof that we had done the right thing, that we had broken the cycle of suffering, giving the kids a chance to live without fear. As I folded the letter and placed it on the nightstand, I thought about my journey. I had once been a trembling boy cowering from my father's fists, a cowardly man who lied to keep the peace. But now, I was a father, a husband, a man ready to stand up for what was right. I looked out the window where the Christmas lights flickered in the darkness, and I told myself that children are the future. Liam, Sophie, the souls who need protection at all costs, no matter the price. The cowardice and weakness I once carried, I had shed step by step, day by day, to become the man I wanted Liam and Sophie to see. My story doesn't end with a grand victory, with reconciliatory hugs or apologies from my father or Harris. but it ends with a house filled with laughter, with clumsily colored Christmas pictures and with a letter from a girl who had found hope again. And for me, that was enough, 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 was enough,